What if two of the most talked about figures of our time, Keanu Reeves and Elon Musk, ended up in a live, unscripted conversation that the whole world couldn't stop watching? The internet loves moments like these, especially when they feel raw, unexpected, and deeply human. Recently, a viral story spread across social media claiming that Keanu Reeves shut down Elon Musk during a live broadcast with a calm but powerful response. While the moment itself belongs more to modern internet myth-making than verified reality, the idea behind it struck a nerve, and that's why people can't stop sharing it. In the imagined scene, the conversation begins like many public discussions do: innovation, technology, the future of humanity. Elon Musk, known for his bold predictions and high-energy confidence, speaks passionately about progress, artificial intelligence, and the need to move fast, even if it means breaking things along the way. His words are sharp, ambitious, and filled with certainty. The audience listens, some inspired, others skeptical, as they've done countless times before. Then comes Keanu Reeves, not as a tech mogul or a futurist, but as something rarer, a listener. He doesn't interrupt, he doesn't argue, he simply waits. When his turn comes, there's no dramatic build-up, no raised voice, no attempt to dominate the room. Just a quiet pause that somehow commands more attention than shouting ever could. In this viral narrative, Keanu responds not with facts meant to overpower, but with perspective meant to ground. He speaks about people before products, compassion before conquest, and responsibility before ambition. He reminds everyone that technology is only as meaningful as the humanity it serves. Progress, he suggests, isn't just about speed or scale, it's about direction. That's the moment the internet latched onto. Because whether or not such a conversation actually happened, the contrast feels real. Elon Musk often represents the relentless push forward, the belief that the future must be built at any cost. Keanu Reeves, at least in the public imagination, represents something softer but no less powerful: humility, kindness, and the idea that success doesn't require arrogance. In the story, the room goes quiet, not because someone has been defeated, but because something important has been said. Elon Musk doesn't argue back right away. He listens, and that pause, real or imagined, is what people describe as shocking the world. The reason this narrative spread so fast isn't about picking sides. It's about exhaustion. Many people are tired of loud voices competing for attention, tired of debates that feel more like performances than conversations. The idea of someone calmly, respectfully reframing the discussion feels refreshing. Revolutionary, even. Keanu's imagined response resonates because it reflects how people wish powerful conversations would go. No insults, no egos colliding, just one person reminding another, and everyone watching, that intelligence doesn't need to be aggressive, and wisdom doesn't need to be loud. Social media quickly turned the moment into quotes, clips, and reaction videos. Some praised Keanu as the voice of reason. Others defended Elon, saying bold progress requires bold personalities. But most people agreed on one thing: the contrast itself was fascinating. It felt symbolic of a larger cultural tension between speed and reflection, ambition and ethics, innovation and empathy. What makes this story especially powerful is Keanu Reeves' real-world reputation. He's long been known for avoiding drama, living simply despite immense fame, and treating others with respect. So when people imagine him delivering a world-stopping response, it feels believable, not because of what he might say, but because of how he would say it. Elon Musk, on the other hand, is a lightning rod. He inspires fierce loyalty and intense criticism in equal measure. Pairing these two figures in a single moment is like placing fire and water in the same frame. The sparks are inevitable, even if they exist only in the collective imagination. In the end, the viral story says more about us than about them. It reveals a hunger for dialogue that feels meaningful, a desire for leaders, whether in tech, art, or culture, who balance brilliance with humility. And a hope that the future can be shaped not just by those who dream the biggest, but by those who remember why those dreams matter. Whether this moment happened exactly as described doesn't really matter anymore. The story has taken on a life of its own, becoming a modern parable shared in comments, videos, and late-night conversations. A reminder that sometimes, the most powerful way to close someone's mouth isn't with force or fame, but with calm, thoughtful truth that makes everyone stop and think. And maybe that's why the world was so shocked. Not because someone won an argument, but because, for a brief imagined moment, humanity seemed to win the conversation. as the story continues into its second act, the imagined silence after Keanu Reeves' words becomes the loudest moment of all. Cameras linger, not because a producer tells them to, but because no one wants to break what feels like a rare pause in modern media. In a world addicted to instant reactions, that quiet space feels almost sacred. Viewers lean closer to their screens, sensing that whatever comes next matters more than the debate that came before. Elon Musk, often portrayed as restless and impatient, is shown here in a different light. He doesn't jump in with a counter-argument or a clever comeback. Instead, he nods slightly, as if acknowledging that the conversation has shifted. This is where the story deepens, not into a clash of egos, but into a reflection on power, influence, and responsibility. Keanu, still calm, expands on his point. He talks about how every generation believes it's standing on the edge of something revolutionary, yet often forgets the lessons left behind. He mentions how tools change faster than values, and how that imbalance can create progress that looks impressive but feels hollow. His words aren't aimed at Elon alone, they're aimed at everyone watching, including himself. In this extended narrative, Keanu brings up the idea that technology amplifies who we already are. If we're careless, it spreads carelessness faster. If we're compassionate, it can spread compassion just as quickly. The future, he suggests, isn't something we race toward, it's something we shape with every small decision we make today. The audience reaction is subtle but powerful. You can almost feel people rethinking their own relationship with progress. Comments start flooding in online, not just cheering or criticizing, but asking questions. What does responsible innovation really look like? Can speed and ethics coexist? Who gets to decide what the future should be? Elon finally responds, and in this version of the story, his reply is measured. He talks about urgency, about climate change, survival, the risks of standing still. He argues that hesitation can be just as dangerous as recklessness. It's a fair point, and the conversation becomes richer because of it. This isn't about one person being right and the other being wrong, it's about two different philosophies colliding and then slowly finding overlap. Keanu listens again. That's key. He doesn't dismiss urgency, he reframes it. Urgency, he says, doesn't have to mean losing our humanity. Moving fast doesn't require moving blindly. He shares a simple idea, that the most advanced societies aren't defined by their machines, but by how they treat the most vulnerable among them. At this point in the story, viewers start to see why this moment feels so powerful. It's not dramatic in the traditional sense. No insults, no viral one-liners meant to humiliate. Instead, it's dramatic because it's rare. It's two influential figures actually engaging, not performing. Social media explodes in waves rather than spikes. Long threads replace short insults. People clip Keanu's pauses as much as his words. Memes appear, but they're quieter, more reflective. Some joke that silence went viral. Others say this is what real confidence looks like, being secure enough to slow down. The narrative then zooms out, placing this moment in a broader cultural context. For years, public discourse has rewarded extremes. Loudness gets clicks, certainty gets applause, but here, uncertainty is treated with respect. Keanu openly admits he doesn't have all the answers. He says that anyone who claims to fully understand the future is probably missing something important. That humility hits hard. In a world full of predictions, admitting doubt feels almost rebellious. Elon, in turn, acknowledges that ambition without reflection can lead to unintended consequences. He doesn't abandon his vision, but he softens it. He talks about learning through failure, about the weight of knowing that millions watch his words and actions. This imagined exchange humanizes him, not as a flawless genius or a reckless villain, but as someone navigating immense pressure. As part 2 unfolds, the conversation drifts into philosophy. What does success mean when resources are finite? Is more always better? Keanu references stories, old myths, classic films, moments in history where humanity reached incredible heights only to stumble because wisdom lagged behind ability. The audience feels included, not lectured. That's another reason this story resonates. Keanu doesn't speak from above, he speaks from alongside. He frames the future as a shared responsibility, not a prize for the smartest or richest. The imagined broadcast ends not with applause, but with a strange, collective exhale. People don't rush to declare a winner. Instead, they sit with the conversation. And that might be the most unrealistic part of the whole story, and also the most hopeful. In the days that follow, the internet keeps the moment alive. educators use clips to spark classroom discussions. Creators analyze body language and tone rather than who owned whom. Even critics admit that something about this exchange felt different. Part 2 of the story emphasizes that the real shock wasn't Elon being silenced. It was the idea that power could meet humility without conflict. That influence could be exercised gently. That strength could look like listening. Keanu Reeves, in this narrative, becomes less a person and more a symbol of a longing people have for leadership that feels grounded. Not perfect, just thoughtful. Elon Musk remains a symbol too, of humanity's drive to push boundaries, to refuse limits, to imagine impossible futures. Together, they represent a tension that defines our time. As the story closes, one idea lingers: the future isn't built by voices that shout the loudest, but by those willing to hear what hasn't been said yet. Progress doesn't have to be a battle. It can be a conversation, messy, slow, uncomfortable, but real. And maybe that's why this imagined moment refuses to fade away. Because deep down, people aren't just fascinated by celebrities or debates. They're hungry for meaning, for proof that wisdom can still trend, that kindness can still command attention, that sometimes, the most world-shaking response isn't a statement at all, but a pause that invites everyone to think. In that sense, Part 2 isn't really about Keanu or Elon anymore. It's about us, about how we choose to talk, to listen, and to shape what comes next. Whether we rush headfirst into tomorrow, or step forward with intention, carrying our humanity with us instead of leaving it behind. And if that's the lesson people took from this story, real or imagined, then maybe the shock wasn't just viral. Maybe it was necessary. Part 3 opens not on a stage or a screen, but in the aftermath, the ripple effects that follow when a conversation refuses to disappear. The imagined exchange between Keanu Reeves and Elon Musk no longer belongs to the moment itself. It has escaped into the world, where people reinterpret it through their own hopes, fears, and frustrations. This is where the story truly evolves, because impact is never measured at the moment of contact, but in what changes afterward. Across social platforms, something unusual begins to happen. Instead of fading after a news cycle, the discussion deepens. People don't just repost clips, they write long captions. They don't just argue, they reflect. The tone shifts from reaction to introspection. For once, the algorithm seems confused. This content isn't angry enough, flashy enough, or simple enough to categorize. And yet, it spreads. In this part of the story, Keanu's words are no longer quoted as a comeback. They're treated more like a mirror. Viewers start asking themselves uncomfortable questions. Am I chasing speed over meaning? Do I confuse being busy with being useful? Do I admire power more than responsibility? These questions linger because they don't accuse anyone directly. They invite participation. Elon Musk's role in this chapter also changes. He's no longer just the person on the other side of the conversation, he becomes a symbol of modern pressure. Founders, engineers, students, and creators see themselves in him. The pressure to innovate, to stay ahead, to never slow down because someone else is always building faster. In this light, his initial urgency feels less like arrogance and more like fear, the fear of falling behind in a world that punishes hesitation. That reframing matters, because Part 3 isn't about heroes and villains. It's about systems, about how modern culture rewards acceleration and treats reflection as weakness. Keanu's imagined calm stands out not because it's rare in individuals, but because it's rare in environments. Silence doesn't perform well, thoughtfulness doesn't monetize easily. As the story expands, think pieces appear. Some argue that Keanu represents a post-ego form of influence, power without domination. Others push back, saying the world can't be built on reflection alone. Bridges, rockets, and solutions require action. The debate becomes richer, less polarized. People stop asking, who was right, and start asking, what's missing when only one of these voices exists. In this part of the narrative, educators take notice. Classrooms replay excerpts, not as celebrity gossip, but as case studies. Philosophy teachers talk about ethics and progress. Media studies classes analyze why calm feels radical. Psychology students discuss why people trust voices that don't demand attention. The story matures, moving from entertainment into education. Keanu, as imagined here, never claims moral superiority. That's crucial. He doesn't say, slow down because I'm right. He says, slow down because we're human. That subtle difference is why people listen. He frames care not as an obstacle to progress, but as its missing ingredient. Meanwhile, Elon's supporters highlight moments where he acknowledges doubt. In this extended narrative, those moments gain importance. Admitting uncertainty, especially for someone expected to have answers, becomes an act of courage. It suggests that leadership isn't about pretending to know everything, it's about carrying responsibility honestly. Part 3 also explores the personal side of why this story resonates. Many viewers are tired, not physically, existentially, tired of being told they must always optimize, always hustle, always improve. The imagined conversation feels like permission to breathe, to consider that a meaningful life isn't a race against an invisible clock. Creators respond creatively: short films, spoken word poetry, even music inspired by the theme of pause. The idea that silence can be powerful starts showing up everywhere. Ironically, the loudest impact of the story is its celebration of quiet. The narrative then turns inward. What would it look like if this kind of conversation happened more often? Not between celebrities, but between managers and employees, parents and children, developers and users, governments and citizens. The story becomes aspirational, a model for how disagreement doesn't have to turn into destruction. Some critics argue the story is idealized, unrealistic. And they're right. Real conversations are messier. Egos flare. Words get misinterpreted. But that criticism misses the point. Myths aren't valuable because they're accurate. They're valuable because they point towards something we want but haven't figured out how to build yet. In Part 3, the idea of winning finally dissolves. No one won that conversation. And that's precisely why it mattered. It suggested a future where success isn't defined by dominance, but by understanding. Where influence isn't measured by how many people you silence, but by how many you invite into the discussion. Keanu's imagined presence continues to symbolize restraint in an age of excess. Not restraint as limitation, but restraint as intention. Choosing not to speak over others. Choosing not to turn every disagreement into a spectacle. Choosing depth over volume. Elon's continued presence symbolizes momentum, the undeniable drive that has pushed humanity forward time and again. The story doesn't ask us to abandon that drive. It asks us to steer it. As Part 3 closes, the focus shifts fully away from the individuals and toward the audience. The viewer is no longer passive. The story quietly asks, when it's your turn to speak, how will you do it? Will you rush to be heard, or wait to understand? Will you chase certainty, or make room for questions? The lasting power of this chapter lies in its refusal to provide easy answers. It doesn't end with a quote designed for merchandise. It ends with a feeling, a subtle discomfort mixed with hope. The sense that something important was touched, even if it wasn't resolved. And maybe that's the ultimate reason this story keeps growing. It doesn't close a debate, it opens one. It doesn't tell people what to think, it reminds them how to think together. In a time defined by extremes, it imagines a middle space where ambition and empathy don't cancel each other out. Part 3 isn't louder than the parts before it. It's deeper. It sinks into culture slowly, like an idea that refuses to be rushed. And in doing so, it suggests a quiet truth. The future won't just be shaped by those who move the fastest, but by those who know when to pause, and why that pause matters. If Part 1 captured attention, and Part 2 sparked reflection, then Part 3 plants a seed. A seed that grows not on screens alone, but in conversations, decisions, and moments where people choose dialogue over dominance. And long after the viral clips fade, that seed may be the most meaningful legacy of all.